I did last time. Okay, beautiful. Okay, here we are. So we were at the triad operation, and I was just taking some notes, and then my Word document went a little strange on me, so that's okay. I'll go through the notes that I have been able to write so far. So I don't have to read word per word from the book, because I think some of it I can cover, and then we'll try to finish everything. Yes, go ahead, guys. Did one of you say something? No. Okay. All right. So we did the first part of the history of magic, which was the separations of the plane and all that stuff. And then now we're at the
Excuse me, Alessandra. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got my internet working. Can you let me in on my other device, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's here. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, there you are. Fantastic. Beautiful. Okay. Guys, mute yourself. Nacha, mute your devices there. Yeah. And Eva, I'm gonna mute you too. And
it does that when you have two devices.
Okay, so then we're good. All right.
And so let us know what page you're on.
Yeah, so it's page 267, but I'm not going to read from the book the first part. I'm just going to give you my notes. So so the separation of the planes of time. Sorry? You guys okay? Oh, I lost everybody. Okay, everybody's muted. Okay, beautiful. So page 267. And it's the triad operation and the importance of the triad operation. So the first part, I'm just going to read from my notes, and then we can go back to the book, okay? So the triad operation, Falco had said that it was the largest and most complex operation of magic, turgic magic, ever undertaken by mankind. It was directed at the divine forces, and it was necessary because they had gone out of control and were no longer working with humanity for over 20,000 years. They were many battles that mankind had over territories and religions that they've been fighting in the last 2,000 to 4,000 years, all around territories and religions. And it's because these divine forces that man created were not working with them, but against them. And so the consequence of that was all of these battles, because if you remember, man created divine forces to act as containers for knowledge that was accumulated lifetime after lifetime, so that he wouldn't have to start from scratch when he reincarnated. And then these forces, as we got lobotomized, these divine forces, we lost control of them. And instead of working with humanity towards evolution, our evolution, they started to work against that, gathering for themselves our energy. So they were not so much interested in helping us anymore. And that's part of what happened because we got lobotomized. We lost the knowledge of how to control them properly. And remember that we created them, they're technologies, but they're powerful because we feed them constantly with our thoughts, all of the divinities. And when we talk about divinities, these are all the religions of the world. The Christ, the Buddha, those are the bigger ones, but every other god and goddesses that are worshipped by humankind, from the small ones that are territorials and just small areas to the ones that are global. Those are all technologies. They can be inspired by leaders, you know, but when people worship that particular thought, it becomes a divine force and a container of energy, and it becomes powerful the more people, of course, give their energy to it. And so they were out of control. And Falco, when he came, he knew that, you know, they had done the separation of the plane of time, which took a lot of energy to do. That and that was the first operation that was important. The second was to take all these divine forces and align them all in helping humanity again. So the triad operation was this operation. So and divine forces. Remember when the fall of neutral events come down, they get tainted by the divine forces that are in those territories. So they are very important at creating the experiences that we are able to have as humans, because they taint that area where they are governing, that territory where they are governing. So if they're against mankind, they're not going to taint it positively. They're going to taint it in a negative way. And combine that with the fact that the synchronic lines were also in the hands of enemy aliens or enemy forces. And the synchronic lines are important because they diffuse thoughts on the planet and in the cosmos. So if they're in the hands of the wrong people and they imprint war, hate, terror, fear, then you are contaminating the field. It's much more difficult. So you had this double whammy on our ability to see above who we really were. So the triad and the synchronic lines together, this, liberating them and aligning the forces back to work with humankind was really important to accelerate us. So the first operation that they talk about, so then, and this is all, Lena, page 267 to 269, all these points. The
Right.
triad operation took 20 years to fully be completed. They needed to they did a lot of magical operations. They actually had to go get the energy from the Grail. So one of the first things they did was to try and search for the Grail, the energy of the Grail, where it could be contained, in order to have enough power to do this job. So the triad operation coincides, the start coincides with also the separation of the plane of time, because in order to gather the forces of all the divine forces together, they had to awaken one of the big divinities, Horus, in 1967. And remember, when we have divine attention, it's when the divinity opens its eyes, and it's the events that happen in that time are much more potent. When it starts to close its eyes, it's usually 4 years that the divine forces are awake. When they close their eyes, they're dragging and pulling into them all the unsaturated events that's in that time packet that haven't been used. So if you wake them up, then you have access to a lot of unsaturated events, which means you have access to a lot of energy that you can create new historical events from, and it's energy forms, and because they're pure, they haven't been touched. So when Falco did the first operation, he was 17, to split the plane of time. He needed large energy, he needed a lot of energy, and there was no setup here for this kind of magical energy for this. So what he did is he had to wake up this divinity, Horus. People are not sure how he did it, but he woke this divinity up, and in his waking up, he had access to all these unsaturated events, which are this huge container of energy. So he was able to create the first part of the operation of splitting the plane of time. At the same time, that energy they started to use to work on the triad operation. And what the triad operation was, at its core, is to gather all the divine forces. I think there's 1,800 of them throughout the planet. There might be more smaller ones. All the divine forces in the planet that have been worshipped, and harmonize them, blend them all together into three different divine forces, so that all the divine forces get transformed as they get merged, and we'll talk about how they do this. And they are now much easier to control, because you can just control it with 3 of them. And if you point them all in the same direction to work with humankind, you can now control all the other ones that you've blended with them, because you've modified all of them by merging them together. as well. So that was in the simplified version what this operation of the triad was. And it started in 1967 with the waking of Horus for the operation of the separations of the plane of the planes. And it took another 10 years to complete the full awakening of Horus and align him to be able to be the first divinity of the triad to be in position. Then in 1980, they started to work on Pan. Pan was another divine force of the planet, and this one is associated of the earth, you know, religion of mankind. And Pan became representative of the planet, the force of the planet. So if you guys remember, in the 80s, there was the big movements towards environment, taking care of Gaia, the planet, and all of this. So it coincides with the work. And that's another thing that they say is when you start to reorient these forces, you have an impact with the environment, right? Because things start to feel differently for people. So in 1980, they woke the Pan, this divine force that was associated with the Earth, the planet. And to do this one, they had to give people that they knew around the globe, connected with them and her, psychic schemas that they would perform, I guess, ritualistic things to feed energy into this process so that it was a global project to awaken, because we're talking about the planet. So that was done in 1980, it started, and the time within, and also to remember that when this plane of time was split, even though Horus contained a lot of energy, it still wasn't enough. So Falco was using also energy from extraterrestrial beings that are allies, that were helping us to give us the energy we needed. And also during the beginning of the triad operation, we didn't have adequate energy sources, so for magical operations. So he was also using energy forces. Right, so that takes us to page 270. And then my computer went a little bit crazy, so I wasn't able to. So the first course of it, okay, then 1967, so first course offer. Oh, and one of the other things that they used to work with the full awakening of Horus is the meditation groups. So this is something that's relevant, because if you guys do with me the alchemy course, you'll realize that all these techniques to gather energy from what we do in our life can be used in magical operations. That's the energy sources. So the meditation groups were used to continuously work on full awakening of the Horus divinity. The second waking took place in 1980 with Pan right? And then the final phase, okay, Pan took about 9 years. And then the next one, so that's around page 270. Okay, let me just say that, yeah. Okay, so let me just go to page 271. I'll just read the second paragraph a little bit. So each of these, and then the last awakening, sorry, before I go there, was Bastet, which was the feminine principle as well. And she was, where is she mentioned here? She's after. Hold on, let me just see. Yeah, so she was after 1980. And then again, they don't give a precise date. Bastet was the feminine principle. And it's also when we started to have more movements toward, in the 80s, more awareness towards the feminine energy. as well. So it coincides very nicely. And when they finally completed the triad, okay, no, let me leave this for the last because it's really cool. So, okay, let's go to page 271, second paragraph. Each of these three awakenings were important achievement from a magical point of view, gradually giving access to different possibilities that we can now take, that now we take for granted, but they were important. Then, each of the awakening. Okay, among these, okay, so what are some of the things that came from this awakening of these divine forces? Among these are the possibilities of triggering the separation of the planes. So that was useful, that helped when Horus was awakened. Information on alchemy, the programming of reincarnations, the use of synchronic potential and dispatch onto the lines, and time travel. So to liberate the synchronic lines, they needed energy, and waking up these divine forces gave them extra energy to be able to also clean and move the enemies out of the control they had on the synchronic lines. So the first part of this operation of waking up the divine forces put them in a it was a good start and important. And then, yeah, and the feminine force woke up later in the 80s, and we saw that also. To result in gradual awakening environment. Okay, and then, so once they had awakened the three main forces, the three main divinities, under which the 1800 other divinities were all going to fall under, now we get to see what they had to do. So once the awakening was completed, so they woke up the three main ones, and now they're starting to gather knowledge, work. They have to first gather all the information on these divine forces. Then they have to wake them all up, and now they have to marry them together. They're going to blend them together, and they're going to do two things. They're either going to fuse them, or, hold on, they're going to do these weddings in which they either fuse them or or condense them. So they either fuse them or they condense them together. Fusion means that they get absorbed completely, nothing, they really get transformed. And the other ones is they get blended with something else, but they keep some of their essences. The reason they had to do this is some divinities really hurt humankind. So they wanted to get rid of that completely. So they fused those. So it was a huge job to gather information on all the divine forces, all the religion, you know, like, can you imagine all the research they had to do? And then know which ones to merge, and under which, would you put them under Horus? Do you put them under the feminine? Do you put them under Pan? So huge work. They also used for this divination, like the oracle. They would make decision, you know, they would also ask, you know, direction from divine forces, you know, like, okay, what's the best marriage to do? So this was all really important. And of course, when they're making these fusions, they're also needing energy. So in 1984, they went on search of the Grail to help them with this. And what did attempt to search for the Grail, I think, in 1994. And let me just do it. And I think it talks a little bit more in the next chapter we're going to go to of how they did that. So the Grail is it's probably one of the purest energies, but it cannot be held anywhere for very long because it burns. So that's why you hear of, you know, people, initiates that get killed because they're in the presence of this energy that just burns them. So you can only gather some of the energy when it does pass, and then it moves on. And so you need containers that can hold this incredible energy. So that's what they were looking for. And in 1994, they did operations on trying to get access to this energy to help them with this triad operation, blending all of these. And then there was also something, so there was about 1,800 forces, that divinities that had to be merged. And many, many operations were done to do that. And right, and the main difference between and the difference between fusion and condensation lay in the fact that the fusion merged completely the divine force, the condensation left parts of it. And then in 1994, so they were still blending all these divinities together, and we heard this also in the other class from Coyote. That's when Falco went to Atlantis, and that's when they were given 66 names of divine forces from Atlantis that they also added to the triad operation. So they also had this, and that's on page 275. So that was the big job. Once they finished this, does it tell us when they finished this? Yeah, the operation was finished in June 2002. That's when all of these operations were finished. And once they had merged them all together and aligned them, they wanted to condense them so that they are left with just one, Horus. And so they had to first blend them, marry them, get them all together. In this, they've changed the qualities of these divine forces. The Horus that is now there is not the Horus of Egypt. It's a different Horus because he's holding all the other traits of the other divinities. So they really had to create something new. So after they did this marriage, then came the work of condensing everything. And in the condensing, they extracted some energies that they also used. It's almost like in the marriages, there was children. So they just kept in creating a bigger and more potent focus for their triad operation, and the energies they kept gathering and condensing and blending and mixing, so that it became one force, even though they still call it the triad, but it seems like it's just one main force under Horus combined. And the energy that this triad contains of all these forces is so potent that they don't need to manage the separation of the planes anymore like they used to, because the triad feeds it on a continuous basis. So that's how the completion of this operation helped them, because the most dangerous thing with the separation of the plane of time, it had been done before, but never for the length of time that we need it now, the 600 years till the old timeline doesn't exist anymore. We need to make sure that this timeline lasts at least and surpasses 600 years. So never has there been an operation where the new timeline has to last that long. So to have the triad containing the triad able to maintain it is a huge help for them. So that's the importance of the triad operation. What else is there? And that's all up to page 275, 276. And let me see, the operation, and so the operation to reduce the divinities, like continuously condense them, is still going on today. And we're defining the levels of 6 major forces. Historic had its day on June, followed by a phase of about 2 months, which ended. Once more, okay, so the operation finished August 12, 2002. And this is very interesting because it's very telltale of what's happened right now. Falco said to them that now that this triad and this harmonia, that these divine forces are working harmoniously now with humankind, it will take 20 years to see the benefits. And didn't Trump just sign 3 peace deals with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates? And it's 18 years. So it was not possible before, but now, so it was cool when I was making the notes. I was like, wow, that's why he was able to pull this off. The timing was perfect. So it's cool. Yeah, and that's what he said. It would take about 20 years for us to see the benefit of the divine forces working with humankind. So there we are. Now, this is the consequence of the triad operation. It's 2 pages. I'm going to read them because it's got a lot of nice information. Actually, the rest of the chapter I'm going to read to you guys because it's well done. And it's got some nice information in there for us. Okay. So the consequence, unless somebody wants to read, you guys okay? Do you have questions? You keep going. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Do you have a
Go ahead.
question, Lena? No, no, good.
No,
Okay. The consequence of the triad operation. So at the end of the operation, Falco said that it would take at least 20 years to comprehend the ramification of this enormous task. But what we already know quite well is that the out of control divinities have finally succumbed, and that the triad is giving a uniform coloration to the events that are meant to guide humanity, while respecting free will, to an integration between different people and cultures, and towards our harmonious rapport with the world on which we live. From the point of view of the relationship with the divine, the triad has brought the possibility of direct contact with divinity to every person on earth, without the need for religious or any other sort of mediation, which was the major source of conflict on the planet for so much of our history. So everyone can turn to their own personal divinity of reference, and every group of people will continue to maintain their relationship with the same divinity they have always turned to. In fact, the operation was intentionally planned so as not to interfere with individual faiths and religions or philosophical beliefs, promoting harmony also by respecting those differences. The harmony is already active on a divine level, but it will take some time before the effects manifest on the material plane, probably about 20 years, as we have just mentioned. Regarding this time estimate, it should be noted that the effects of living for centuries with out of control divinities cannot disappear all at once, but will leave residue traces for some time. It is very probable that we are going to witness a radical transformation of world society over the next 20 years or so. This being because the social order in which we live today is the result of this extended period of imbalance between humanity and the divinities. In practice, the society we live in is not conducive to human evolution, so these aspects must and will change. At the same time, we are also going to witness some backlash from various human groups that were linked to particularly cruel, out of control forces, and who will continue for some time in their activities, though they will no longer have a divine system in which to support them. Regarding the structure of time, we are going to witness a particular phenomenon in which the duration of time packets will diminish, and this will allow for periods of divine attention to occur much more closely together on our linear timeline. This is actually a very important point. As we know, important changes at a human level are much more likely to take place in moments of divine attention. So having a certain number of these moments in a shorter period of time will enable us to have more chances in less time. Remember, the time packets are broken up by the divine attention, and they used to be 66 years. They're much shorter. And you'll see, like, they're coming every 20 years. less now, which means that those moments when the divine forces have their eyes open, the events that happen are much more potent on the plane of time. So we know that the last time packet had a duration of 30 years, which is half the size, 1967 to 1997. While the packet we are now in, which began in 2001, would have an even shorter duration that would last 15 years. Remember that comment that I made when we were studying the time packets, that right now in the pandemic, the divine forces, they open their eyes in 2017 and it will be open till 2022. So right now we are under divine attention, and it's only 15 years since the last one. So it's speeding up and it's more potent. What is more, the completion of the triad also marks an important milestone in the separation of the planes, since the new systemization of the divine makes the maintenance, the divine forces makes the maintenance of the new timeline practically automatic, thus allowing our attention to turn to the next phase of our operation. During this next phase, we will not only concentrate on maintaining the structure of the new time plane, but also on its future in order to see how this program might best proceed. This new phase of the program is being implemented by the means of the relative time satellites program. Remember the time satellites, they put in the territory of time these satellites that act like huge viewers of the timelines, to choose the best one to keep our timeline going. So these are satellites there, if you want, it's like a telescope that goes up over the fabric of time, saying what do we have to choose in order to end up in that direction. So these are satellites that they are doing. So they can now work on these other magical operations. That's that. Now, technical overview of the working of the triad. This is interesting because you see how involved it is. So I am going to read it because I think it is interesting. Okay, or maybe I can just review it shortly. What was interesting here in this page and a half was, so you've got the triad operation, maintaining the synchronic lines, and they are also, wait, how are these planes? These faces were... Okay, hold on. In fact, the period which is going. No, okay. You know what? Let me. It's not as simple as. Yeah. Let me read it to you guys because it's got a lot of stuff in it, little stuff. So, technical overview of the triads working. So, how does this triad work? So, in 1998, after first preparing the structure of the cosmic spindle was this stone structure where they gather energy from the synchronic knots in the planet and outside. It's basically energy gathering technology to be able to do these operations that they're doing. So that's what the spindle is. Were carried out. Okay. So in the first preparation, the structure of the cosmic spindle, ritual operations were carried out that set the patterns according to which the triad would then work. So it was important to also program the spindle to work harmoniously with the triad. Even if the operation was not yet complete, these phases were prepared in advance, so at least some of the triadic function could be used, since the need of the moment demanded it. So they needed energy. So they needed, even though the triad finished 3 years later in 2002, in 1998, they were connecting already the energy of the triad, whatever they had accomplished, to the spindle so that they could gather energy from the triad already. In fact, it was the period in which the discovery of concatenation revolutionized a world, the technology system, and triggered the beginning of new levels of technology advancements. And the concatenation was this additional step that they did in gathering energy for their magical operations, which when they used it, all of a sudden amplified everything they were doing. So instead of getting 10 units of energy, they got 10,000. So all of a sudden, by adding this one magical technology called concatenation, it amplified all the other technologies they were using at that moment. So this really helped them to become energy independent, if you want. Thanks to these operations, the divinities in the triad were subdivided into 7 main groups, which was formed by choosing divinity with similar characteristics and matching them to the days of the week. Each of these groups was linked to 3 of the major triadic divinities that would represent the entire triad on their corresponding day of the week. So remember in the class, Chacha, I know you weren't with us, but basically the divinities need to have their expression. They all merge together to be controlled and to be harmonized with all the qualities so that they can't go against mankind, because the direction is in one way altogether towards helping humanity. Yet they still need to have a bit of their expression, even though they've been modified. So what they did is, since they now don't have territories to express themselves in, they broke up the days of the week, the hours of the day, and each divinity gets to express themselves at different times. So this is the division that allows for that. Why it's important for us to know is when you start to work with alchemy or magic, it's really important to know what divine force has their eye is working with you at that moment. Because if you're going to extract water on a Monday, and then the water you extract on Monday is under one divinity, so that water will have a different energy than the water you pick on Tuesday, because it's under the watch of another divinity. So this is just taking the triad operation and breaking it down in more of its subtle parts. It's going to be something we'll use when we do alchemy or magic. You know, those are going to be important elements. Okay, what divine force is awake now? Do I need the fiery divinity, or do I need more water divinity? Like I'm just giving you an example of what I'm thinking. You know, we'll learn of that. So basically, that's what they did. They took this triad, they broke it down even further to make sure that all these divine forces had a way of expressing themselves, just like us with our personalities. We need to blend them, but we also have to give them time to express themselves. And the cosmic spindle helped them in this, because in the cosmic spindle there's different points of energies. They're called Memphis, and each of the Memphis were aligned with one of these different categories. So we can, if you want, I can give you more in details. So they give an example. So on a Monday, for example, a group of 200 divinities might be engaged. So on Tuesday, another 200. So it was really, because it's important to give each of these time of expression. They don't have territories anymore because they've all been merged, but this kind of working with them allowed the divine forces that have all blended together to have a moment in time where they can express themselves, even though they are modified. They are not having the qualities they had before they were all merged together. So a Shiva before and after is different. You know, the Buddha before and after is different, and so forth. A Pele before and after is different. And this is all on page 279 to 281. Yeah, and basically at the end, for the alchemical magical point of view, the knowledge of details is fundamental, because in order to produce any substance, energy, and effect on form, the divinity that is coloring the events at the moment must always be taken into consideration. So that's why it's important. It can be very detailed. So magic development after the conclusion of the triad. Yeah, guys, I'm just gonna give my little kitty cat a little bite to eat. We're gonna read these next few pages. Are you guys okay to do that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let me go feed this little
Feed the kitty.
Feed the kitty. Yes, yeah. Okay. And this is also fun. So you have to realize all these, what are these divine forces that mankind has been creating over millennia? They are containers, right, of people's of a people's history. All the tribes, you know, all the knowledge went into these divine forces so that they can hold this knowledge. So when you break them all up and you rearrange them, guess what? You get a lot of data. So this is really fun because the magic developments after the conclusion of the triad. What's left is, so at the completion of the triad project, the immense wealth of knowledge and information contained in the reservoirs of all the divinities belonging to this new pattern became accessible. So the next step taken immediately after the completion of the triad were the operations aimed at uploading the great quantity of data known as the dowry of the triad onto our plane of existence. So that's on page 281. Since there were such great amounts that could actually be contained and applied to our present time, keep in mind that this vast holding of information came to us from a wide variety of times and civilizations. So remember one of the magical tools, the psycho-elaborators, those anomalous objects that have disparity of the laws in them. They can act as huge computer chips for data calculation. And we were wondering what kind of data, like time travel, if they need to figure out where they have to go, they use it for time travel. They, you know, they put this thing on somebody and they can compute all this stuff. Well, all this dowry of information of these 1,800 divine forces, they wanted to make sure they extracted the best of that they put into the synchronic lines, because then you put that knowledge onto everybody and everybody can access it, and it enriches, right, the complexity, because you've got knowledge from very old ago. So they used this technology to figure out what was the best things to extrapolate. So that was the psycho-elaborators, was put to use in order to let absolute synchronicity select what was most suitable and usable in our time. Space, context, that amongst the myriad of possibilities, right? So instead of, you know, synchronically what was out of all that stuff, what was the best information? So that's what these psycho-elaborators do, because they take a lot of energy, right? We use them very rarely, but that's what they're good for. Isn't that cool? Like, oh my God, like Star Wars, like what else is it? Hogwarts. After making this selection and preparing a series of special containers in which to preserve the information, including the temple, personal selves, and in part a type of time creature with whom contact had been made, the first stage of the download began. All the information in the form of triadic package was emptied into these containers without any way of knowing what exactly was included. The presence of the Grail was crucially important in this phase of operation too, as it took on the function of distributing knowledge in addition to its usual role of being simply a container of it. At the completion of this phase of downloading, new operations still continuing at the time of writing, the opening of the triadic package completed their planning stage and had their start. Gradually, one by one, these packages are being opened through specific rituals, and the information contained inside is made available. This information is as varied as can be imagined, from sophisticated magical technologies to information about human history and social organization. The wealth of knowledge is also being gradually transmitted onto the synchronic lines so that it can inspire the minds of human beings all over the world. At the time of writing, we had opened about 600 packages, and there is no indication, this was 10, 15 years ago, no indication of how many packages there are. We don't know. We don't know. Now, this one I can just share with you. Okay, no, I'll read the last few paragraphs, but in a nutshell. So you've got the triad energy created. It's different than what it used to be. It's going to have an impact. It's going to take about 20 years for us to feel it. But now what do? They start to use the energy of this triad to also clean up the space on the planet and other planets. So they call that orienting heavenly bodies to the triad energy. So it's almost like smudging your room. They've got this new triad with all these divine forces aligned, and they're going to smudge the cosmos, planet by planet, section by section. In a nutshell, that's what they're doing here. So operation of the orientation, this is page 282, operation for the orientation of heavenly bodies previously carried out on Earth in order to net all the minor unnamed divine forces that have not restarted in this new post-triadic age. Okay, to align all smaller divine forces that maybe didn't get captured. In this case, the aim of the operation is to put a specific mass on the same frequency as the triad, the Horus frequency. As previously explained, a compensatory mass must be used whenever energetic potential is moved. No, you know what, it gets complicated. Basically, as of, I'll go to the end of page 283, as of December 2007, the heavenly bodies that have been oriented include the Earth, the Moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter. Thanks to these operations, the usable mass for the operations mentioned earlier has grown considerably. Furthermore, thanks to these operations, it has become proportionally possible to manage all the features of mass, included gravity. Oh, this is important. This is important. So furthermore, thanks to these operations, it has become proportionally possible to manage all the features of mass, including gravity, for instance. So not only have they gathered all the little, leftover divine forces and oriented them, but they've actually oriented the physical mass of the planets to be aligned with the triad, right? The triad is about getting us to evolution and working for humankind. So what does that mean in a practical sense? This means that if, this is on page 284, for example, there were asteroids that posed a danger of collision with the Earth, the potential of an oriented planetary mass could be used to create a sufficient gravitational thrust to change the path of the asteroid. Isn't that fascinating? Once the operation of orientation are completed through the solar system, including the sun, important time features as a microscopic level will very likely become available as well. Okay, so once they align also the sun, was the sun already aligned? It looks like they're going to access other energy sources. So among the compensatory function of the heavenly bodies, special note should be taken of those linked to the extraction of energy from synchronic points found far from Earth. In the chapter on. So another aspect of their operations is that any intelligence or consciousness related to a given planet, such as those treated by astrology, for example, are inserted into the triad, which then extend its boundaries beyond the earth. So hold on. As long as the heavenly bodies should be taken for those linked to the extraction of any. Oh, so it is another aspect of this operation. I thought it was really cool when I read it, but I can't remember now why it is. Can you guys give me a second so just I read it again? Amongst the compensatory functions of the heavenly body, special note should be taken of those linked to the extraction of energy from synchronic points found far away from the earth. Another aspect of this is that any intelligence or consciousness related to a given planet. Okay, so it's also aligning beings on these planets to our purpose. So it's not only orienting the mass, but it also is helping to align the beings and intelligence that are on that planet to our, triad energy. So it's quite a important influence. It's almost like it taints also their vision of us. And these heavenly bodies, remember, are used, the planets are used to access, using the concatenation energy from the synchronic knots that might be out there. That's also a huge energy that we can tap into for magical operations. Okay, the liberation of the synchronic lines. Okay, we'll read that one. And this is page 284. The liberation of the synchronic lines. The history of this other very important operation, which was clearly earned a predominant place in the history of great magical operation of our time. We already discussed it in the previous chapter. We'll just go quickly over it. As we have seen, these three operations intersect at many points and each relies heavily on the support of the other. The complete history of these operations would need to include aspects that are still unknown, except for a few details, such as the end of the Magic War in 1975, many aspects of which remain a mystery, the series of operations that help other worlds liberate their lines, their divine systems. So it looks like the synchronic lines also had to be liberated in other planets, not just here. The numerous visits by Enkidu, Falco's extraterrestrial friend who played a role in this game that has never been completely explained, the many Viaggio operations that carried out secondary missions other than the overt ones we know about, the thousands of experiences in time travel, and probably a great idea of other things as well. Despite these missing pieces, what has been presented so far in this book should give the reader a clear enough overview of the situation. So these are the main things that they talked about, but behind the scenes, there were a lot of operations to sustain these kinds of activities. I don't think as humans we could have done it on our own. So they were things that they were doing that were not known to everybody. And then the pre-Atlantean culture project, I think this should be read in full because it's important. I might skip some things, but most of it I feel is important. So the pre-Atlantean culture project, chronologically speaking, the most recent of the great time technology-based operation began in 1998. The goal of this operation involves the asserting of events. This consists in traveling to the past and repeating events that have already been saturated in the normal time sequence in order to increase their density and weight upon the fabric of time. Remember when we talked about time travel, we were always going back to places where we had unsaturated events to create something new. We wanted to put something in that time territory or time packet that would have an impact here today. So we would do these calculations to see where was the best point in time, but it was always to add something new, to work with an unsaturated event. This is different. Here, they're going back to make an event that happened stronger so that it has a greater impact today. So this is a different kind of operation that is taking place. So these are saturated events that they're going back to imprint again on the plane of time to impact us, because they know that if they do that, it's going to have a stronger impact on what we're living today. So this operation is carried out at those points in time where a lack of density or a tear in the fabric has been discovered. As we saw in the chapter of time, in fact, these conditions can be very dangerous, both for the structure of time and for the forms living in time itself, producing interference and weakening time effects by correspondent. No, so let me read again. So these conditions can be very dangerous, both for the structure of time and for the forms living in time itself, producing interferences and weakening effects by correspondence or by cause and effect at other points in time. So if in that point in time an event is not able to stay on the plane of time because the fabric is weakening, then every other event connected to it gets weaker. So if we find that, you know, we need more of that because this is something we need in our timeline, we need to go back and fix that event and make it firmer on the plane of time. That's the difference here. It should be easier because we know that it's good for us. Well, the other ones we don't know. Remember, they needed to put the book in the machines to see if it changed anything. Instead, this one seems more piercing, more precise. So there are even holes in time like the ones found in the absolute present on the old timeline, right? So on the old timeline, 600 years ahead, there's a hole. Fortunately, we are in possession of tried and tested time technology that we can put to use in an effort to avoid the degeneration of these points in time through the process of assertion. So this kind of reconstruction of the fabric of time is called assertion of events, which metaphorically can be thought of as like going over faded, illegible writing to make it decipherable once again. So it's almost like going back and highlighting them. That's what they're doing. So when this is done on the structure of time, not only does the point in question regain new density, but the signal given by the assertion also extends to all the other possible points in time that are linked to that one that is being worked on. In practice, the fabric of time is repaired, and this means that pieces of history that were previously unknown and which are crucial keys to understand our present are brought to light. So Chacha, this is for you. So you fixed your beautiful material and then it's nice and strong again. So let us take a closer look at the operation itself, which is not a simple intervention on one single point, but is actually more like the operations of the separation of the plane as far as it affects and the necessity for continuity are concerned. The need to initiate an operation on such a large scale can be found in the strong ties that bind our Damanurian school with certain moments of the Atlantean civilization. We know that much of the knowledge now used in the context of our school is derived from this great civilization, which was the last advanced civilization to develop on our world. Many souls linked to the Quarks project and many other aspects, art, sacred language, also came from this point in time. But in the collective consciousness of humanity in our time, the civilization of Atlantis is generally considered a myth, or perhaps the disproportionate blown up of some reality that was actually, sorry guys, my puppy's barking. Give her a second. Is this interesting or am I reading this to myself? Is this okay?
This is great.
You
Yeah.
like it, eh? Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to get through the end of the book today, but we're going to need one, the other one. Okay, so this talks about the corks, the Vinet project, actually, what Coyote was going to talk to us. So here it is. So in the collective conscious, so as we know, Damanhur is very connected to Atlantis. I think they've done operations with Falco to bring back this knowledge. And for the rest of humanity, Atlantis is just a myth. Sorry, guys. Let me go to have a hold on. Okay. So now let's find out. Okay, but in the collective conscious of humanity in our time, the civilization of Atlantis is generally considered a myth, or perhaps the disproportionate blowing up of some reality that was actually much different from the others surrounding it, but made use of its exaggerated form for the equivalent of science fiction. So we don't give it a lot of weight. This perception naturally derives from the fact that there is little or no proof or relics, ancient documents or others sufficiently reliable to prove its existence. As far as the field of archaeology is concerned, Atlantis is a myth and nothing but a myth. And even if there are researchers here and there that feel some evidence of its existence has been unearthed, this is still not enough to alter public opinion about the reality of this civilization. As far as a trace of Atlantis on the structure of times are concerned, we find exactly the same. Our present is strongly linked to historical events connected to that civilization, but there is no longer any perception of this reality. This means that the point in time in which we can find Atlantis has lost part of its density. Keeping with the example given earlier, it is as if the writing of Atlantis has faded and is no longer legible. It naturally follows that this loss of density has its repercussion in our own present time, which could constitute a great obstacle for human evolution. Perhaps it is not such a coincidence that the period we have been passing through from 2001 to present is a time zone suffering from low thought pressure, low density of thought, a condition that must be dealt with. This was the motivation behind the major operation to assert the entire Atlantean age. In order to carry out such a complicated operation as the Pre-Atlantean Culture Project, it was necessary to start from an even earlier age. So the project began by searching for suitable time zones in which to set up the operation. The plan revolved around the formation of a new people, beginning with a group in a condition in which there was no type of affirmed civilization or reality to speak of, then guiding their development step by step. This is where it gets like out of this world. So in the first part of the operation in 1998, after having carried out extensive research in time in order to find the most suitable time period, Falco began by undertaking a series of time voyages in which he presented himself to a group of people as a being who was there to entrust them with a mission. We can only imagine how effective and striking these appearances must have been to a group living practically at the time of the Stone Age. The people he contacted in this way did not question the encounter or the message, and instead simply adopted to the situation. Thus began a new adventure, one that included many voyages in time, carried out at carefully calculated time distances, plotted in order to best follow the development of this group, a development that would, in a time not yet completely defined for us, lead this group to the founding of Atlantis. Can you imagine? Like, they had to go back to the Stone Age to program and edge along so that Atlantis would come. That's the operation he came to do. It can be difficult to grasp the complexity of this project, but just try to imagine what it would mean to follow and program the development of a civilization, of an entire thread of cable of human history that begins close to the Stone Age and leads to the founding of the most evolved civilization that the esoteric tradition can recall on this planet. From the year that have passed from the beginning of the project in 1998 to the present corresponds to so many centuries of history at the other end, at which have been closely followed and monitored by means of much time traveling. Many events have taken place, various geographical areas have been occupied, cities have been formed, there have been internal wars, there are many moments when a selected process has to be decided upon in order to keep on the right path towards the realization of the project. As of the last few years, a new stage has begun, one where many Damanurias have had the opportunity of participating directly in the project by means of specifically programmed incarnations at the point in question. In some cases, there have been multiple lifetimes lived by the same person in that context. Regarding this subject, it is worth remembering that the souls can be in multiple points of timeline without any difficulty, and furthermore, this experience instantly adds new personalities from these incarnations to our present personality information, so it enhances complexity. In any case, monitoring of the project's development continues by means of time travel at regular intervals in terms of the destination points that are being visited. When this civilization, which has been constructed following the guidelines of a precise plan, gets to the point of founding Atlantis, the assertion operation will be complete. This should produce some very interesting effects on our present. Oh my God. So we will probably see some unusual archaeological discoveries, or in any case, some other new evidence that forces us to reevaluate what we now hold true about our history. In practice, if Atlantis becomes denser on the fabric of time, then the same effect should also be visible in our present, thanks to the links between the 2 points in time described earlier. Something to this effect has already taken place recently in Bosnia, where it was discovered that some hillsides with unusually regular geographic shapes were actually ancient pyramids, certainly dating from earlier than any documented civilization in history. Furthermore, there also has been a marked increase in sites assumed to have important relics, and there are now around 10 of them. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, I'm mispronouncing a huge temple structures like Stonehenge, but bigger, I think, older. So furthermore, there has also been a marked increase in the sites assumed to have important relics, and there are now around 10 of them. An interesting aside, not necessarily linked to the subject at hand, but once that offers some food for thought. An innovative technique in the restoration of old books has recently been discovered that allows many ancient texts that were too faded and damaged by time to be legible, to finally be legible again. This leads us to believe that there could be many references to historical events under our noses that we don't even have the necessary techniques, knowledge, or technology to decipher. and we may not have it for many years to come, leaving these truths hidden until then. This concept is perfectly in line with the principle of the assertion of events, which is aimed at the repetition of saturated events rather than their modification. The operation in question is still in full swing, so the information present here will need updating. But the latest update at this time are the operation has produced a separation of time planes very similar to what was produced in our present, while the future of the project is still very open, and so there are still many different directions that it could take, with many variables that could affect each of these other possibilities. Dun, 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 So they have done this operation. I thought it would be simpler, so it sounds like it's more complex. So he went back to the beginning of the Stone Age to recreate Atlantis and make it more dense. I guess that was the only way to repair it, was not from the timeline of when Atlantis got destroyed and just repair the fabric, but actually going back in time, changing it so that it would have a different outcome, and then greater density is cool. So that's what they're doing. And I can say, I've been to the Bosnian pyramids. They're impressive. They're very impressive. They're not getting as much noise, but for a while he was in the news a lot. We would probably need a discovery like that right now, just to distract us from this craziness that's going on. So that finishes out now. The beyond the speed of light. I mean, we can do it, guys. I have my notes on it, so I don't have to read it. But the beyond speed of light is, you know, when you finally get comfortable with your real, your 9 primordial divinities, derivative laws, and you think you got a grasp on it, the carpet is taken off from right under your feet, and you're thrown into another expansion of thoughts. So it is just a page, but it's a dense page. We have time. Do you want me to take you through it? So then we have beyond the speed of light done. And then the next time we do the over universes, which is another one of those. I mean, the rest is, I don't think it's, I mean, we could finish it now, but it would take at least a half an hour or an hour. Or you guys, I think we should savor it. I think what do you think? What do you guys, whatever you guys want.
I have to leave at 9, just so I don't
Yeah.
mind.
Okay, so let's keep going. Let's keep going to as much as we can. Yeah.
This is a great chapter. Beyond the Speed
Oh,
of Light. Einstein.
this is a great chapter.
Okay,
Yes.
you do it. Alessandra, you go.
Beyond the speed of light. So, you know those 9 primordial divinities, the real, okay. Hold that. But now we're gonna pop it into multidimensional understandings. It's the same thing, but it's on multi-dimensions. Okay, we're gonna add that element. So get ready to stretch the brain. So beyond the speed of light, let's begin with Einstein's theory that the maximum speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. That is also the speed that determines our relationship to the flow of time in our reality. If an object in our reality would exceed that speed, then according to Einstein's formula of energy equals mass, mass squared equation, the mass of that object dimension would be greater than the universe in which it is found, producing an evident paradox. So according to Einstein's equation, energy, mass, and velocity squared, if something does travel faster than the speed of light, in that equation, it would have to be so huge. It would be bigger than the universe that Einstein calculated for. So it's a paradox. It doesn't make sense. So there's a reason. Because guess what? We have a universe that we are living in that is at the speed of light. But there are 8 other universes parallel to ours that, guess what? Their speed of light is way faster than ours. So point number 1, let's go through this and then I'll tell you the bombshell. So in our universe, Einstein was correct and the formula works for our universe. But Einstein, didn't know Falco, right? So he couldn't realize that there was these 7 other universes, us being the 8, that are all doing speed of light at a different speed. So this is what this is about. So in spiritual physics solves this problem of Einstein's equation by stating that there are parallel universes, and where their relationship to time in that universe is different, and the speed of light is faster. Actually, out of all the other 8, we're the 8. So at the other 7, we're the slowest. Remember, the selfic technology comes from a very fast, that's why very fast universe, and it comes from another dimension. It's not part of our divinity, it's part of another divinity. And that's why it's very good at predicting and helping map different events for us, because it has that capacity. So they're coming from one of these other universes. So beyond the speed of light, now it's time to explore the universe of form as much larger than what we normally imagine. The playing field of the human primordial divinity is only one part of form, delineated by the speed of light. In other dimensions, other sections of this universe, the speed of light progressively increases. To be precise, we have 8 sections which correspond to 8 different parallel universes, all part of form, each with its own speed of light. Ours, the speed of light is the slowest. And now I'll add the fun element. Remember, we had the story of creation. There's 9 divinities. Each one comes as its turn, doesn't interfere with the other. Well, superimpose all that they're all in one of these parallel universes, having their experiences all simultaneously. And the 8 divinities are the 8 parallel universes are us being the 4th and all the other ones. And then the primordial divinity is also staying in the real. So my question to Coyote, is there one primordial divinity that splits itself into 8, the 9th being the one that stays in the real, observing the experiences outside of form and then inside of form? So are we all part of the same big, gigantic, primordial divinity? You've got the real, which is the absolute, and this primordial divinity, which we all up to now have thought there was 9 of them, but there are, because when they express in the world of form, they break off into 8 other universes, the 9th being what stays in the real. So is that cool? Like, we thought we understood something, and there it's like, no, because you can't give it to us at the beginning, because we would have been hard to digest it, right? So they had to layer it for us. So that's what's going on. So now let's name the other speeds and how it represents what it means. So the maximum velocity, so we've got the speed of light here. And then the next speed, it's called maximum velocity A, which is another dimension. The speed there is 5 times faster than the speed of light. So they are going 1,500,000 kilometers per second. They have their own laws, their own speed of light, their own laws, their own divinity that manages that. Then you have the next dimension, the next parallel universe. It's called velocity B. This one goes 80 times faster than A. So 120 million kilometers per second. And they give you a reference to a distance so you can get an idea of what that means. So at this speed, with the speed of light in our universe, we would arrive at Alpha Centauri at 4.3 light years. Is 4.3 light years like it's 4 years? Is every light year? Can we do a Google quick, guys? I'm curious. I didn't do that. Can you guys have a look? Is a light year equal to a year? So that would be in our universe. So in our universe, to get to Alpha Centauri would be 4.3 light years away. If you're in this dimension where you're going at 120 million kilometers an hour, it takes you 40 days. Okay, it's not a big journey. Now, also note that every increase in velocity changes the parameters of reality. So the forms that are there are they're gonna be different, the experiences of what's there. The other, so maximum velocity C, this is another parallel universe. This one is 90 times faster than B. So this one is going 108 billion kilometers an hour. So this one would get to Alpha Centauri in 10 hours. So the other one was 40 days. This one is 10 hours. Then there's the universe maximum velocity D. The speed here is 12,000 times faster than C. And this one would get to Alpha Centauri in 3 seconds. Then you have maximum velocity E, which could actually go across the diameter of all the galaxies in 5 minutes. Then there's maximum velocity F, that's even faster. And then maximum velocity G is the speed at which the soul atom travels. So you're at maximum velocity here of speed with this one. At this speed, not only does the time reality change, but what happens is the laws are not anymore 8, but they're compressed to 1, because the only thing, the speed is just following the soul atom. Now, I'm not saying that the soul atom is living in this dimension. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what kind of speed is at this dimension, okay? The laws here would be reduced to 1, since the only necessary function would be the soul atoms. So, so note, in time travel operations, these dimensions are traveled, since we travel at the speed of the soul atom on the symmetry line through the synchronic lines. So they experience this velocities when they're doing time travel. They have to compress themselves and travel with the soul atom. So there's some important things to note. The speed of light of our dimension is occupied by the human primordial divinity, us, the fourth divinity. The other dimensions are occupied by the other primordial divinities. Remember, the selfic creatures belong to one of those other divinities. Each of these dimensions have a different speed of light, and where the other primordial they're where the other primordial divinities are playing out their games. They also have the 8 derivative laws. The difference is, in our dimension, the 8 derivative laws each have the exact same weight. In these other dimensions where the speed of light is faster than ours, the derivative laws don't have the same weight. They are disproportionate. So it could be, so when you think of it, the primordial divinity is brilliant because it's giving itself all the variety of experiences it can have. So in ours, it gives us all the laws weighted, and in the other, it's going to predominate one, so that it sees the difference of what it's like when one dominates the other. Isn't that brilliant? Like it's very genius, you know, the way that it does this. And remember, for the those technology devices that help them compute things, they need an anomalous object, an object that has a disproportionate law expressed in it. It's unusual. We can't find them in our universe because everything is so proportionate. I'm wondering if these inanimate objects come from these other dimensions, from these other universes, parallel universes that are brought here. So that was interesting. And now you may be saying that accounts for 8 of the primordial divinities. Where is the 9th? The 9th is the primordial divinity that is in the real, maintaining its presence contemporaneously in and out of forms. Dun, 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 dun. Wasn't that brilliant? Wasn't that brilliant? That's the beyond the speed of light. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. Okay, that takes care of that chapter. So let's keep going. Okay, this one I didn't have. Okay. Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna stretch our brains. Okay. So you want more? You want more? Let's keep going. Okay. The over universes. I'm just gonna read this one because if this one, if you so you just realize that the primordial divinity is one. It's dividing itself in form. It creates all these parallel universes. It's all happening all at the same time. Okay, great. That gives us one piece of information. Now let's add to that there's multi over universes. And let's see, I think you guys are going to grasp this. My question to Coyote today was, hey, are over universes and these parallel different universes the same thing? Or are we talking of layers on top of layers? And I have a feeling it's layers on top of layers, but here we go. Are you guys okay to do this? You okay? Okay. So modern maximum systems theory, the over universes. Okay. When we talked about cosmogenesis, we came across references to the world of ideas, the world of numbers, and the demiurges, all of which participated in the process that gives origin to form. These elements were taught in our school around 1995. We now have more advanced theories, which do not replace the functions of these 3 worlds mentioned above, but instead simply place them in a different context within maximum systems. To better understand this new interpretation, we must introduce the concept of the over universes, macro fields of existence that are much larger than our normal view of a universe. Since an over universe can contain all the possible universes. According to this theory, existence is represented by a series of these macro fields, which either have a direct or other, as yet undefined relationship with the primordial divinities. The world of ideas, the world of number, and the demiurges are part of the ranks of the over universes, while form represents a 4th over universe. The distinction between these different realms lies in the fact that each works on with its own laws, which cannot be applied to the others. In other words, we have our universe of form. That's one universe. The world of ideas, that we thought was unique to us here, it's not. It's got its own universe with its own laws, with its own mechanisms. The demiurge, we thought it was part of form. It is, because we use it to create the form, but it comes from its own universe. It has its own laws. So these concepts are held in their own little universes. They're not part of us. We use them, but they have their own, they're having their own experience, just like we're having ours. And we can enter. So is that clear? Is that it's spacey, but just, yeah, that's basically these big concepts that help construct us, also have their own universes. And my question to Coyote was, well, are those also part of the is a primordial divinity also part of the world of ideas? Is that where it's existing? Is it the same as the dimension? I don't know yet, because he didn't answer me. I sent him 10 questions because I was like, hold on a second, what does this mean? So let's continue. It's not long, but it's potent. Only the real represents a super law that can pass through each of the over universes and therefore manifest in each one with the same principle of absolute totality and balance. The number of over universes have not yet been determined, but we know that it relates to the number of the primordial divinities. So I think there's a connection between, the universes, and the over universes and the primordial divinities, but it's not clear. Now, the part about the real is important because the real is outside of the primordial divinities. The real it's absolute. It has no problem entering all of these universes. And we also know, because we use the word of ideas, the demiurge, the numbers in our universe, that those are able to enter. So one of the next concepts that they talk about is the real can enter these universes no problem, because it has this absolute law, capacity to enter. He's got the keys to enter all these different over universes. The over universes can't just enter, they need keys. So it looks like they need to enter when they contribute to that universe, because the universe of the demiurge, the universe of the numbers, and the universe of the world of ideas are fundamental to us being able to create matter. So that's a key to be able to enter. So it looks like they can't enter at random, but if they have the key to enter, to me, the key is they contribute to the development of that universe, then they can enter. And the key for us is the combination of the number, the idea, and the demiurge, which we talked about in the creation of the material, of the material object. Now, so another established element is that, yeah, there's keys. Okay. At the same time, we must not insert the new concept into a discussion. So this is interesting, which is what I was saying to you. At the same time, we must not, we'll now insert this new concept of the over universes into our discussion, as they probably represent the primeval divinity's field of expression, such that each has more or less direct rapport with an over universe. Okay, that was more confusing than anything. Let that go. And on the other hand, we know. Okay, in the universe of form, on the other hand, we know that the human primeval divinity is the fourth in order of arrival. So the different theory, no, okay, the laws that we discussed in the first part of the book are very valid in the form. Okay, let's do this paragraph. Sorry, guys. So the laws that we discussed in the first part of this book are only valid in the form over universe, while in the other, we would certainly find ourselves dealing with different laws that are all still unknown to us. Okay, so you know what? Don't worry about that one. Basically, the idea is that these things that we thought were part of ours aren't. Of their own, they have their own little universe. They do interact with us. There is a relationship with these and the divinities, the primordial divinities. It looks like maybe there might be 9 over universes, so that it also coincides with the primordial divinity. And it's, Lena, this is for you, but for all of us, it's an idea. I wonder if the archetypes need to be able to express like what the real has. It's the absolute laws. They can enter any universe. I wonder if the archetypes need to have this capacity that no matter where, what universe, they are consistent. Like they would work in our universe, but they would work in another universe as well. I'm wondering, because we know mathematics is one of the archetypes, and numbers are one of the things, one of the universes. So anyways, it was just a nice something for you to think about.
Yes, thank you. No, I have a whole download.
Oh, okay.
You were not going to do today.
No. We don't want to
I got it all last night at 2 a.m. So yes.
Oh my God, congratulations. Okay, guys. The next chapter is the shadow of form. And basically, everything that is created on all universes has a shadow form. And the shadow form is necessary in order to balance it. Otherwise, it cannot exist. So everything that is here has its expression in the shadow form. And there's 2 theories around this shadow form. Is it just a shadow and cannot really participate, or is it also creating drama and participating? And the Damanurians seem to think that it's participating and creating drama. And it is also an energy. So that's what that explains. And then we have the beautiful Grail, and I think it would be wonderful, and the 3 mother worlds. So I know you have to go soon, but I'm going to try to. The Grail, I think, is important. This is an energy and a power that has been with us forever. It has been sought after, but never been able to stay long because it can destroy. The different expressions of the Grail have been 5. We are in the 6th right now, which is the disease. And the Grail energy now is actually stabilized. The Damanurians have done some work that it is present here, so they can have access to it. Yeah, the completion of the triad, and with the help of the triad, it's a force that in the great once again preparation of the 6th age, in which will be sought once more object. New data should be understood. So that is the Grail. I mean, you guys can read it. It's it is probably the most potent force, energetic force. It's the same as being at the center of the sun. It cannot stay long. It has not been able to stay long because it would pulverize the space. But they've been able, and that's why containers, swords, chalices were used to hold the energy of the Grail, because they couldn't hold it for long. They would just hold its energy, and then as it left, they would keep that energy contained. So that is the Grail, and Damanhur. This is a beautiful story, not so beautiful, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of esoteric knowledge that's around the globe. So in Damanhur's history, we can find the first sign of the Grail in 1984 during this early phase of the Viaggio and the Game of Life. This is on page 312. When the first chalice that ever hosted this force century ago was found, it still had traces of Grailic energy that proved to be very important for making contact with the Grail itself. Another important trace was uncovered in a temple on the island of Sri Lanka, again doing a viaggio in the early 80s, where a group of monks had kept a fire relating to the Grail force burning for about 6,000 years. Falco, along with a group of travelers, made contact with these monks and were entrusted with the fire. This was then taken to Damanhur. Just a few months later, the temple was destroyed by Chinese soldiers who also killed all the monks. At this point, it needs to be pointed out that there are really 3 grails. 2 of them are currently on Earth, while the third is not. The traces relating to the first chalice and the fire given to Falco by the Buddhist monk relate to the 2 different grails. Although we are unable to provide more details at this time, clearly the history and nature of this force, including its tripartite nature, is thick with mystery. One last concept regarding the tripartite nature of the Grail is the theory which maintains that the moment of the reunification of the 3 Grails is the time in which our world will finally be free. One could well hypothesize that there is a connection between this concept and the unification of the 3 mother worlds, for which the function of the Grail are necessary. Moving forward with Damanhur's history as it relates to the subject, after the moment in which contact with the first trace of the Grail was made, this force occasionally transits through Damanhurian territory. Each time this was considered to be a very special event and was prepared for and celebrated by the community citizens. Another point of connection during these first years was the Turin Shroud, which has been put in public display in that city. In fact, according to magic history, it would seem that this object, reserved as Christ's burial shroud, is linked to the force of the Grail by being its contact point with our dimension. Effectively, in relevant magical technologies, both the objects that have been prepared as accumulators and the objects representing the cloth on which to set the Grail are necessary. Technically, the cloth represents a reference point for our dimension, keeping in mind that this force is a hyper-anomalous object that moves through different dimensions and universes. The presence of the shroud in Turin also signifies the presence of the Grail, or perhaps more likely, the presence of someone who guarded the Grail in Turin. In the complex balance of forces that have surfaced over the last few centuries, Turin has kept this very special role, thanks to which the Grail was guarded within its territory, though whomever was guarding it did not actually use it. The shroud maintained its function until the early 80s, where it was substituted in its relationship with the Grail by the flag of the Game of Life, which had actually been stolen during a viaggio and then recovered by Falco through the use of magic. In fact, it was during this recovery in which the flag traveled along the lines of symmetry of form throughout the universe that it acquired the characteristics that rendered it suitable to become the Grail's new cloth. At the end of the 80 series of ritual operations took place, which by also utilizing the function of the Grail shadow, managed to secure a more continuous presence of the Grail in our dimension. This result soon became very useful as most of the magic turgic operation relating to the composition of the triad took place in the 90s and necessitated a great deal of this force's presence. The completion of the triad in 2002 has signaled the official end of this 5th age, during which the citizens of Damanhur had carried out the same role as the Knights of the Middle Ages, namely discovering the Grail and completing its function as a chalice, a process which could be considered completed at the conclusion of the triad. In the future, we will witness the veiling of the Grail once again in preparation for the sixth age, in which it will be sought once more and identified with a new object and a new function, which is disease. And now it's available to everybody. It doesn't need to be held in the shroud of Turin or in the flag. Anybody who is sick is got and is touched by the Grail. And Falco's cancer was a prime example of that force. So this is what's very unique about the representation of the Grail today. And then the three mother worlds and the update on recent developments. The council. Okay, Bella. I can finish it, but I know Shana, you have to go. I can read them, you guys. Bella, you have the recording, so we'll send it to you, Shana.
Okay. Thank you. Oh.
Ciao, ciao. You guys are all. I'll just read them. Okay, the three mother worlds. So the three mother worlds. So according to the esoteric tradition, in our most remote past, our planet underwent a very particular event about which there are various theories, an event that divided our unified system into three different worlds: the human world, the world of the spirits of nature, and the plant world. These are the mother worlds, and the divine spark is hosted by mankind, by the nature spirit, and by plant creatures on their respective realms of worlds. Although these worlds all derive from a single origin, they no longer have any contact with each other, though there is an indirect form of contact by way of the echo worlds. In fact, there are many intermediary realities that can develop, which reflect certain aspects of each of these worlds. According to an ancient theory of the Greek philosopher Cerberus' students, these words can be found at the points of an equilateral triangle and all the various possible echo worlds developing along the sides for a total of 60 per sides. So this is what Coyote was sharing with us, the triangle with the three worlds and then the 60 echo worlds in between. So therefore, according to this theory, which defines reality by means of a geometrical structure, there are 183 possible worlds, 3 mother worlds, and 180 echo worlds. In the Damanurian view, we have tried to interpret this concept in the following manner. There are 3 mother worlds that originated from the division of the primordial worlds, and there are also 163 possible elements distributed among form that originate from the division of the primordial divinity within form. And lastly, there are 20 fundamental archetypes that were taken from mankind following the great loss to the enemy, adding up to 183 in this case. Let us analyze what sort of reality corresponds to these theories. We are obviously in the world of form, but the division of the worlds is not a condition that extends to the entire universe, but has rather more limited borders, though they are not precisely defined. So it sounds like this division is only in our universe. The other, because this story is relevant to the human primordial divinity, the fourth divinity, us. In the other parallel universes, this is not the same story that they're living. They're probably living another story. But this is part of our battle, our lobotomization that split these parts of us in 3. There are actually some ancient myths that speak about the time in which the creatures of these 3 worlds lived peacefully together within the same reality. In fact, during this period of human history, nature spirits were not considered imaginary or more or less perceptible creatures as happens today, but were physical beings just as we are, while plant creatures, which now exist only in their own world, had very different possibilities from what we can observe in our plant kingdom. Then this famous division occurred due either to a natural event or possibly to enemy intervention. And this division created a situation that no longer allowed for the divinization of matter, something that can only take place in a complete and united reality. There is yet another theory which maintains that the Golden Age has not in fact passed, but actually represents the future, and our species and the species of the other two worlds will encounter it when the universe's process of formation is finally completed. This view is based on the hypothesis that the universe and form are undergoing a process of evolution on a vast scale, in which the laws are given local applications and applied with different characteristics. If we analyze the current situation in these three worlds, obviously with reference to magical knowledge, it is evidence that the laws are incomplete in their manifestation in each of the worlds. For example, the fact that in our own world, we cannot perceive forms like nature spirit is not because our senses are insufficiently attuned to such things, but rather because the nature of our reality, being incomplete, is unable to contain these other realities. At the same time, there are elements of these various other realities that require the complete applications of the law, which is why it is believed that there was once this primeval reality in which the laws were in fact applied completely. Nonetheless, if we examine the nature of time, we will find that we often come across paradoxal moments in which the effects precede the cause. Thus, the hypothesis that the reality represented by these three worlds is going through an evolutionary phase, which will end with the unification of the three different realities, and it can be upheld. We can always see some proof of this completion in today's world. The divinities, for example, are consciousness in which reality is not divided but complete, in the sense that all three worlds are contained within them. From a magical point of view, the unification of the world is something that must be taken into consideration, since it is essential to be able to repair the shattered mirror. In fact, there is a project underway involving magical operation aimed at engaging with time and the laws in order to help trigger this process of unification. This project resembles the work done for the composition of the triad, the different beings, that in this case, the elements being manipulated are not divine forces, but worlds, dimensions, fractals of reality. The function of the Grail are once again essential, since the Grail is an element that allows any form of energy to be catalyzed and transformed. Through this time, we find ourselves already in the new phase of renewed search as regards to this force. This being so, the function that the Grail will manifest will no longer be its traditional role of a cup or container, but a whole new function which has not yet been identified. As far as the research of this project is concerned, we know that to be able to define this new function will be identified with a new object, we shall need to complete our search for all the time matrices. So in essence, in order for us to succeed in our jump in evolution, we need to merge these three worlds together, the world of the plants and the world of the nature spirits. We cannot attain it without this unification. The Grail seems indispensable and fundamental to help us because it can help merge, but it's really important to know that this is important. So the music of the plant device, bringing awareness to that is important, is an important job. So, and it's also interesting that it's related to the Grail and the three parts of the Grail. Okay, and then the final one is the recent development, and then we are done, beautiful creatures. Oh my God, okay, let's finish that. 10 more minutes. An update on recent developments, which are 15 years ago, but that's okay. And remember, the Grail today is disease. So it is the most potent energy here for transformation. So let's trust that what we are going through has this element, potent element in it. So an update on recent developments. While theory concerning, oh, that was also interesting in the laws. What was interesting, what we just read is, we think that this division of the three mother worlds might have happened because of a loss to the enemy. My understanding is that's what caused it. And also they talked about, it's very possible that the derivative laws that are here also are not working at their full potential because of this lobotomization. So that might be why we cannot see nature spirits and we cannot talk to other forms, because the laws themselves are not working at 100% capacity because of the impact of this lobotomization. So it might not just be us, but everything that's here. So I thought that was interesting. I had never heard that before. Okay, update. So while theory concerning the laws and major system of spiritual physics have remained relatively constant and needs little updating, technology and research in general have seen several new developments in the last 6 years. One of the most important of these concerns the Grail. When the first edition of this volume came out, it was only available within the confines of the Damaner School of Meditation. This was May 2008. A short time earlier, Falco had finally determined the new form of the Grail in the 6th era. In point of fact, many things were happening at that time. For example, the 8th and last time matrix linked to the law of complexity was recovered after years of research. Selfic technology attained a new level thanks to fresh knowledge gained from the matrices. The first new creature of this kind to emerge, Natalina, was a complex device that proved crucially important in the recovery of the 8th matrix. The 8th matrix, each of the derivative law has a code, an algorithm. If you know the code algorithm, you can manipulate the law. So it's very important in magical operations. So they finally found all the codes to work with the laws. Clear testimony of the advance of selfic technology, apart from Natalia, are today a new cabin of the application of selfic prano-self, as well as dozens of new self used in healing. The latter are at an experimental stage at the present time, proving some rather interesting results. Turning to the operation aimed at the orientation of masses, which is the orientation of all the planets to the energy of the triad, and protecting us. The results achieved up to the present have been considerably greater than had been predicted earlier. In 2011, the orientation of the masses of our solar system was completed. This included orientation of the solar mass, something which was called for considerable effort because of the size involved. From that moment, attention was turned to the star systems beyond, starting with those nearest to us and reaching out to arrive these days at distance of several thousand light years from the Earth. Through such operations, a territory is gradually being defined which looks to the Earth more or less at the center, with which one day be host to the, Through such operations, a territory is gradually being defined which looks to the Earth more or less at the center, in which one day it be able to host a revived human stellar empire. So this orientation of these stellar bodies with the triad energy, which is the divine forces all working to help evolve humankind, is so that the energy can be set on the planet Earth to once again host the human empire, like in Atlantis, which is the comment that Falco made. Maybe our time trajectories toward the past, returning back to Atlantis rather than going towards the future. Regarding the project of the pre-Atlantean people, the story so far is as follows. After developing the necessary technology, this culture set out to explore space, thus coming in contact with other worlds and other civilizations. There was a period, in fact, when the civilization settled on other worlds before finally deciding to return to Earth to found a new great nation, the new Atlantis. Of course, from our point of view, all this has already happened. We estimate that the founding anew of Atlantis led to the creation of 4 different timelines, 4 possible outcomes of this reality. One of these parallel histories will at a certain point fall together with our own timeline, becoming our story of Atlantis and bringing the operation to completion. However, it is not possible to calculate now which of these 4 lines this will be. In 2011, Falco began to write Tales of an Alchemist, in which he recounts a series of episodes concerning his preparation and awakening, which happened before Damanhur came into existence. Through this book, he reveals certain concepts which have had repercussions on our Damanhurian school, not least from the technological point of view. He also speaks of various elements related to alchemy and the spiral creatures. It was at this point that we learned that spirals are not just circuits which influence us by having an effect on our subtle bodies, but are in actual fact creatures that come to us from the stars. During this period, the new school of alchemy came into being, providing a basic training in the managing of the elements, the evoking of forces of various levels, and the alchemy of living forms, including in particular the creations of chimeras. Through the School of Alchemy, Falco came to define in 2012 the great new mission that Damanhur would need to undertake, the journey to the central fires. This in itself is a revelation. The dreaded 7 scarlet doors, which the book of the same name speaks, are not just a metaphor for one's inner journey. They are real portals that physically exit into the depths of the earth and are connected with certain synchronic knots far beneath the surface. These portals give access to a series of very special libraries where all human learning is recorded, as well as the knowledge lost to humankind in antiquity. The fascinating new mission is to reach and then comb these storehouses to return to humankind the knowledge stored there, and to give a signal to the higher forces who oversee the evolution of mankind that man still has the possibility to carry the divine spark within. Reaching these doors is thus seen to be like passing an examinations test set by the council. Meanwhile, thanks to the participation of many friends of Damanhur all over the planet, a parallel operation was mounted concerning the plant world, and in particular, the orientation of trees. This was an extension of an original operation that began many years ago to prepare Damanhur's sacred woods and involved what was termed the ritual baptism of more than 12,000 trees. In this case, the operation carried out with the aid of the Selfic devices was aimed at trees in every corner of the globe. And so the involvement of many people, sorry guys. The involvement of many people worldwide was and is crucial. To return to the new form of the Grail, which Falco determined in 2008, the whole school worked for 5 years to define this, coming very close in certain cases, but never completely succeeding. This brings us to 2013, a delicate moment for the entire school. In March of that year, it became known that Falco was suffering from a serious illness. This led to his death on June 23rd, the day of the celebration of the summer solstice and the oracle for the month of June. The whole school had lived through 4 months of especially density, during which in April, Falco fully revealed the new form of the Grail. It was illness, a concept that would necessarily require a lengthy period of work on its interpretation and research into the new meaning beyond the immediate. This revelation resulted in a great wave of emotion felt by the whole school. Everybody could see the special connection between Falco and this new manifestation of the Grail. In the following months, Falco sought only Damanurian treatment and certain non-conventional therapies. Going to the meetings he held every week while Damanurians and with guests up to the very last. And I was there on the last one. I didn't know he was dying. I didn't know who he was. After his death, the new and historical phase began for Damanur. Falco has devised a way of being present despite his physical absence. The most recent operation to be carried out according to the instructions he left us concerning the realization of the plant world temple, a new level of connection with the sacred woods, in turn connected in outreach to the orientation of trees in so many parts of the world. This whole operation is of decisive importance for the reunification of the three mother worlds. All of these new topics will be treated in greater depths in a second volume coming soon. So that's the book, and it's very interesting because I was there. The first time I went to Damanur was on that solstice, and it was a full moon. There was the oracle, and after the oracle, the full moon ritual, equinox, the solstice ritual, they asked the Damanurians to stay, and it was really powerful. I didn't know that he was passing, but you had the open temple and the biggest full moon over the temple throughout the whole ceremony. And I've only found out, a year after, when I got closer with Damanur, that that's the night he died during that ritual. He passed on. So that's the work they've been doing. Okay, guys, unmute. Who's left? No, Chacha left us too. Oh my God, Chacha left. Oh.
No,
Guys, how's everybody?
I'm still here. It's all great. It's really great.
Good.
Very deep.
Good. I'm gonna stop the recording. I think that's good enough.